My name is Devin Harclerode. I am an artist and educator, and I live and work in Richmond, Virginia. My work for MATRICULTURE is a meditation on and rejection of oppressive systems scaffolded by the exploitation of reproductive labor. To demonstrate this, I've made 5 curtains that correspond to specific spaces significant to reproductive labor. The work utilizes the language of a curtain, something that hangs between the public and private threshold, to consider the slippage between boundaries, such as the personal and political, and pain as a transgression between the outside and in. When making the curtains, I engage in reproductive exercises as a means of healing and alternative mothering. These exercises produce the materials of the work: natural dyed silk, fermented SCOBY leather, reproductions of children's drawings, and composted silk. I use silk because of its relationship to care. To make silk, you first need to nurture and mother a silkworm. I have natural dyed all the silk from matriculture, and I choose dyes based on their material histories, potential relationship to the referring window, the aesthetics of looking like a clot, a cramp, or a bruise, and the potential healing or poisonous properties of the dye. For example, the window of the Supreme Court is dyed with madder and calendula, and then it's over-dyed with pokeberry and modified with iron. When I dye with madder, it is to heal. Madder is deeply connected to labor histories, being a major component of the Silk Road and the East India Company. Madder root also has anti-inflammatory properties and is often used to soothe menstrual cramps. I also use calendula to heal. Calendula is an herb that is widely used for anti-inflammatory and antispasmodic properties. It is brewed in teas or distilled into tinctures to relieve the pain of cramps. When I dye with pokeberry, it is to poison. Pokeweed is a native plant to most states in the U.S. Its flowers contain fuchsia berries and are poisonous to eat. And when I modify dyes with iron, it's always to bleed. Another material quilted into the curtains is SCOBY leather. SCOBY leather is made through fermentation, a process in which something slowly bubbles and breaks down into something new. For the project, I built a SCOBY farm. I had several tubs filled with a mother SCOBY and sweet tea. Given the right environment, which is essentially a womb-like space, the mother will grow to fill the tub and produce babies. To care for the SCOBY babies, I would feed, burp, and massage them. When the babies became an inch thick, I'd pull them from their wombs to dry in the sun, and during this process, I embedded drawings into the leathers. These drawings are reproductions of drawings that were gifted to me from students during my time working at a Reggio Emilia school. I painstakingly reproduce the drawings, taking time to exact line width and proportion, and by doing this, I spent a lot of time with them, allowing myself to learn from my students in an effort to reverse a child-adult hierarchy. The last material used in the curtains is composted silk. The process of composting is one that cares for breakdown to yield productive wrought. Composting can be a model for exiting toxic systems, one that favors decomposition over reform. In Jacqueline Rose's On Violence and on Violence Against Women, she writes about how violence begins in the psyche through a denial of existence. Violence as a denial of existence is consistent with Julia Kristeva's theory of the abject, where the corporeal cast-off becomes a site of terror and is often responded to with violence. The composted silk triggers the abject in look and scent, and the abject is implicit in reproductive labors such as childbirth, abortion, and the degradation of performing care work or producing labor power for little to no wage. I use composting to conjure the abject and to illustrate pain, but also to consider rot as a fertile future. One of my objectives while making this body of work was to consider motherhood as an expansive realm, first through the dispossessed cramp, and I define the dispossessed cramp as the pain of a contraction, the stuff of biological reproduction extracted from the uterus. A cramp or contraction also triggers pain, and for matriculture, the work represents the pain of a cramp as a metaphor for the denial of reproductive justice and the boundaries, legislation, and cultural norms that persist to exploit reproductive labor. To give birth or to mother is burdened by the violence of capitalism. This is present in anti-abortion laws and access to prenatal, perinatal, and postpartum care, and the underpaid or unpaid work of caretakers. To heal the pain, I want the dispossessed cramp to open up spaces of alternative mothering. And modes of alternative mothering is employed in the work through fermentation, speculative dyeing, teaching and learning collapse into one, and composting. I select these processes because I believe they are in opposition to the mainstream systems that rule daily life, which favors the fast, the hierarchical, or the pragmatic. The windows I chose because of their relationship to my experiences with reproductive labors and their larger connection to political systems. The windows where my son will sleep matches the windows in my son's nursery, who is labored out 7 weeks early during the making of this project. I chose these windows because giving birth is tainted by the legislation and cultural norms that politicize the process. My pregnancy, birth story, and NICU bill triggers both traditional motherhood and the complications of having a child in an unsupportive political system. The window where I taught matches the window where I worked as a Reggio Emilia teacher and caretaker. I believe teaching is both a form of care work, a kind of alternative mothering, and a potential space of revolt when care is considered fundamental to the practice. The window where I had my first abortion matches the memory of the window in the apartment where I labored my first abortion at 19 years old. I labored my first abortion with the support of my twin sister, a traumatic time that was softened by her care. The outlawing of abortion and subsequent lack of government support for parents is a class issue. Reproductive justice begins with an understanding that it is denied through capitalism. The labor power of a waged worker is dependent on the unpaid labor of a reproductive or domestic agent. The window here in a garden city matches the windows of Tephra. I wanted to make a curtain for Tephra's windows because I was laboring for the exhibition, but also because of Rustin's relationship to the Garden City movement, which is a utopian pro-worker experiment in urban planning that designs a city with equal parts residences, agriculture, and industry. The Garden City movement has been exploited nationally as a privatized, profit-driven venture and internationally as an arm of settler colonialism and imperialism. It is a movement predicated on nuclear family mythology. And last, the window of the Supreme Court matches the windows of the facade of the Supreme Court building. 25 miles from Tephra, the Supreme Court is fundamental on how reproductive labor is legislated and regulated in the United States. Dobbs versus Jackson reverses Roe versus Wade, and in doing so cements the politicization of the act of giving birth.